Monstrous. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a monster? What actions might be considered monstrous? Welcome to the Black Pill for a rare apolitical post. Not much more than a word game? COVID boredom induced descent into semantics, perhaps? The kind of thing Wittgenstein would have turned his nose up at and also engaged in. He'd have said something like, all philosophy and even science and 100% of politics in the modern age is just disagreements over the meanings of words. But he was a genius and I'm not, so let's ponder. I've pondered the question off and on since childhood. My grandmother was a writer. Don't worry, you've never heard of her. I remember her arguing the point with a friend almost before I was old enough to know the meanings of words or remember things. She said it was a matter of intent. A bad person does the wrong thing, not knowing the difference. But a monster, an evil person, knows the wrong thing to do and does it anyway. This is part of the basis of the American legal system. In fact, the guilty mind, or mens rea, the one who does not know right from wrong, is innocent and legally insane. Wolves and bears and sharks aren't monsters. Certainly they're not evil. They're just organisms doing what they do without any particular feeling about it. George Romero would later say the same. His zombies, he said, are innocent. Like sharks or lions, they're merely hungry. They have no moral code to violate. The people in his films, they are the monsters. They know the difference between right and wrong, and sometimes choose to do the wrong thing. Not merely the stupid thing, right? It's sort of a trope in zombie fiction, be it the novel or the film or the ongoing 7-year TV series. It's sort of a trope that it wouldn't be very interesting fiction if people made the right choices. And so they often make the wrong ones, stupid ones that get people killed, and then they have to live with the guilt there. That can't be all of it, though, right? Just choosing to do the wrong thing. Yeah, that's pretty mundane. People make wrong and ordinary choices every day. Running red lights, having a whiskey on a school night, scrolling past your creepy uncle's racist Facebook post without saying anything. These acts might be arguably bad, but nobody would say they made you monstrous, a monster. This brings us to enormity. The word is misused so much. The misuse has entered the lexicon just literally, which now means emphatically. People use enormity to mean the quality of being oversized, conflating it with enormous or enormousness. Enormity, though, is about immorality. Because it's been attached to hugeness, though, not just any immorality will do. Has to be big, like eating people. Dahmer died in prison for the enormity of killing and eating other people, not for running red lights or sometimes cheating on his taxes. That's certainly going to extremes. Hitler and Stalin went to extremes. They were clearly monsters. Human monsters, which is, it's almost an oxymoron. The horror writer knows that the monster has an element of the uncanny. People can be monstrous, but not literally monsters. We mean it metaphorically. Existential psychologist Kirk Schneider's book, Horror and the Holy, points to extremes of size as ungrounding. To be without limits is to be inhuman, immortal outside of time, outside of space. Classic horror like The Incredible Shrinking Man or Attack of the 50-Foot Woman show us people disappearing from the normal world into a world of the familiar made strange, uncanny. Shrink and the world grows around you. Ordinary things become sinister. You could drown in the toilet, or the household cat could eat you. Begin to grow and become exposed. Clothing no longer fits. Eventually, neither do houses or warehouses. There's nowhere to hide. People become afraid of you. I'm just thinking of a script. I'm too stupid to do unscripted anymore. But I'm just thinking extemporaneously about superheroes. You know, Superman is in this sense monstrous. He's limitless. He starts off, being kind of strong, and he can throw a car, maybe lift a car, jump over a building, whatever. But he's still subjected to the laws of gravity, physical law. But as he gets more popular, he gets more powerful until by the last Superman movie I saw, bullets were bouncing off his eyes, and he threw a continent into space, despite it being made of kryptonite. He floated in the sky, listening to everyone complain about their lives like God, right? And that's grotesque. Like, I sympathize with Lex Luthor, and filmmakers have started to pick up on that, at least in the last 10 or so years. Batman versus Superman, I think, takes it on, at least indirectly. Brightburn, what if the Superman baby, what if Kal-El actually was from a colonizing race? And oh god, it's nasty. I haven't ever seen The Boys, but the pitch is that this is, what if sometimes superheroes, supermen, go bad, right? They would be monstrous. What is that line between this being with so much power that it can't be constrained or held to account? What if that being hurts us? In the novel The Persuader, Lee Child confronts his protagonist, Jack Reacher, with a giant. Reacher is already an outsized man at 6'5" and 250, but his new nemesis, Paulie, is over 7 feet tall and a steroid freak. Child writes about the dislocating feeling of being a big man suddenly confronted with a much bigger man. Like, reality just lurched off to the left. And I'm a fairly big dude. I'm not a giant, but I'm fairly big, and I can confirm at 6'2" and 280 or so, I'm generally the largest person in any room that I enter. What is it, 1% or so of humans are over 6 feet tall, And in particular, traveling the world where people haven't had a history of nutrition like the US, and people are much smaller, suddenly running into someone who I have to look up at it's slightly weird. It's slightly dislocating. I get it. Much of horror is about the big over the small, right? King Kong, Godzilla, all the kaiju movies. Michael Myers towering over his victims. Jaws, a great white shark so improbably large that a conventional boat is insufficient. Then we get used to the outsized creatures and aren't impressed anymore. 4 Jaws movies later, and we need Megalodon instead. A host of imitators. And what do we have? Lake Placid with it was an alligator, right? Not a crocodile. Was it a crocodile? All the classic, H.G. Wells, Food of the Gods, right? Giant ants and spiders and whatever. The uncanniness of something that usually small and controllable suddenly having power over you. There. Size isn't the only way to the uncanny, just a word association right now with the word enormity. There's a kind of psychosis that literally causes the familiar to seem unfamiliar. In this delusion, the victim thinks all their possessions have been stolen and replaced with exact copies. Or worse, that the people they know have been replaced with imposters, leading us back to monsters. How many alien invasion movies start with human replicas being grown in pods? And through this lens, the first Matrix movie is a horror story. The whole world is fake, and hapless humans are forced to participate in it. Although you might be forgiven for sometimes wishing the world were fake and we could just reset the Matrix back to some kind of human decency. We're living in the shittiest version of the multiverse sometimes. Although, okay, so we have deliberate immorality and the uncanny, some weird step to the left. There might be one element left. Success. Another element of American law is that the thought is not the deed. You can't be tried for contemplating murder, only for attempting murder. Someone who plans a mass murder but never succeeds might not be thought of as a monster. They probably aren't thought of at all. I used to work with adults who experienced developmental disabilities. Most of them were ordinary folks. Yeah, they needed some help. There was a certain central tendency to want to watch WWE Raw on Friday nights, but otherwise perfectly normal, human beings who just need a little help with this or that. A visually impaired person might need adaptive devices, allowing to substitute touch or sound information to navigate the world, just like I wear my spectacles, right? Adaptive devices. A person with a cognitive disability, however, would need me to interface between them and society. I was the adaptive device. Anyway, frustration was often high. One of the key predictors of frustration-related acting out, in fact, is the inability to get your own needs met, the inability to communicate to get those needs met. So, I heard a lot of violent fantasy from guys absolutely at the end of their tethers, and no one ever took it seriously, right? Just people blowing off steam. But some. Oh man, if you heard my self-talk, you would be really worried about me. Don't worry about me, I'm fine. A tiny little percentage, when I worked in that program specifically, were sex offenders. The worst one of them had harmed over 100 children in the community. It was well known. Another was a sadistic torturer who I won't tell you about specifically in this video. Up close, they were pathetic. They were really just awful, sad, lonely, useless losers. My job is to drum up empathy for people, and I could do it on the scene, and here years later, not so much. To the victims, though, and the families of the victims, these people were monstrous. They were monsters. A white supremacist sitting in a basement pondering the overthrow of America might be merely pathetic, a pathetic loser. One who makes it into a position of power and harms people. Now, that is a monster. So monsters, if not human, then inhumane, conscious of the immorality of their actions, successful, larger than life, at least metaphorically, and uncanny. Sure, that doesn't cover everything. Friendly comments welcome. Okay, bye.